people who are least represented in all these technologies are the ones who are most affected by them.
Welcome to Connected Conversations. I am Elena Petrova, founder and CEO of Adastra Inc. Let's share the inspiring stories, strengthen our bonds, and pave the way for a brighter future, one conversation at a time. Welcome to Connected Conversations. We are here at Los Angeles, and I am with Sheriff Issaka, who is the head of research on African languages. Sheriff, before we start this conversation on research and AI and the digital world of languages, can you take me back to Ghana, where you grew up? Can you take me to the moment when you want to express yourself in your language and you couldn't find the words for the world to understand you?
Right.
How did it feel?
So it's interesting growing up, right? Because for me, I grew up in a melting pot of languages. That in my house alone, there are like 10 languages circulating very easily. Because where we grew up, you go to school, you're expected to learn English. You grew up in a community where they speak Hausa, they speak Chi, they speak Kusasi, they speak Busanga, there's Dagomba, there's Arabic, and you need to be able to fit into all these different sections. And like with my mom, I'll be speaking one language, and then in the next moment we switch to another language, and then my dad a different language, and my siblings a different language, my immediate neighbors different language. And so I grew up being able to be immersed in all these languages. And for me, that's very fascinating. I didn't think much of it, to be completely honest with you then. But I think for me, the big turning point was actually after I came to the US. So what happened was, after my first year in college here, my very good friend who's from China, he wanted to visit me in Ghana, which is amazing. So he was in Ghana, we're enjoying all the good food, playing soccer in the streets and whatnot. But then there was always a language divide, that my friend spoke about 3 languages, and then in my immediate circles, people spoke 7 languages, 9 languages, right?
You speak 7.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's no way for them to interact. Can you believe that? Like between them, it's probably some 12 languages, and there's absolutely no way for them to connect with each other.
And why is that?
Well, I mean, that is not, a lot of the people in my circle would not speak English, right? Which is, we can think of as the universal, lingua franca to some degree, but a lot of people in my circle wouldn't be able to communicate in English, right? Which is typically the bridge.
Right.
And then my friend who came didn't speak any of the African languages that they knew. And so that was really why there's that big disconnect.
And disconnect. So again, you speak 7 languages. In your family, you mentioned about 10.
Oh, yes.
African continent, it's all about, 2,000 languages?
Yeah, more than 2,000 on the continent.
More than 2,000 languages. And still there is a disconnect.
There is a big disconnect.
And mostly because of connection to English. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to say is for people who want to connect with people outside the continent and do not know, say, English or French or any of the other high resource languages, despite them being able to speak 7 languages or 8 languages, it's still almost a disconnect. There's no way for them to bridge that gap. They have to actively learn these languages. I have friends right now who are based in like French-speaking countries, and they have to actively learn English. And people like to be able to get a job that it will pay them in these French-speaking African countries, they actively have to learn a new language. And think about it, they know French, so you would think the world would open up to them. But even that is still a big bottleneck. They need to learn English. And right now, Chinese is also becoming pretty big.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And again, you also grew up without technology. You grew up without computer.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
When you first started thinking about it, and then you got introduced to technology, how did it feel to understand that your language has absolutely no connection with the digital world?
Yeah. That was a shock to me to some degree. here. So you mentioned earlier having limited access to technology growing up, and that's true. Like I remember when we were in high school and whatnot, you wouldn't be able to have a personal computer, and so like the school would have one lab where people would go say once a week for about 30 minutes, and when you're there, basically teaching you how to use a typing software like Mavis Beacon or just how to use spreadsheet. I mean, this is not long ago, but it's crazy to me that growing up they would draw like a keyboard on the board, like with chalk, like, oh, this is where you click, this is what it does, this is a monitor. You actually have to draw it on a board instead of having the physical machine. And then for me, I started becoming interested in tech through a book. We had a library in school, and it's like a very shitty library. But then there's a book on this very old programming language, if you can even call it that, called Visual Basics. And for me, I looked at it and it's almost like an encryption. Like, what is this? And then very quickly I realized it's somehow a way to communicate with machines. And that for me was very fascinating. And so from that moment on, it's like I had never written a computer line of code. I had no idea what the book was about. But I'm like, okay, I think this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. But the whole AI journey itself, for me, remember I was just talking about my friend who came to visit me in Ghana. So for me, that was very frustrating. I have to be there all the time. These guys can speak 10 languages. Why do you have to be there to have communications between them all the time? And so it just made me think, well, if I don't want to be here to have to actively interpret for my language, this was a very specific language that I was thinking about, then maybe I was studying computer science then. It was just only my first year. I was like, okay, what about me trying to build some software to be able to bridge that gap? So it was very naive of me. Let me just build a software to bridge at least one of these languages so that I don't have to be there in the future when my friends come to visit my family. And once I started that journey, I quickly realized that, yo, this is like like a problem that I cannot even fathom. Like almost all African languages are considered low resource, right? And all of
So
them.
basically, there was no match. There was no data for you to connect them.
No, nothing. And so that's where you had to start from, step zero. Have to look up for data, collect data, talk to people. And this was even before ChatGPT and all these LLMs started becoming so famous, right? So very few people even knew what an LLM was. I think it was mostly an academic pursuit, like because I was also in school then. So for me, it's like an academic pursuit, like, oh, I can try to build a GPT model, a BERT model, all these really old models that everybody was very much experimental in nature. And then next thing I know, I was already dragged into 10 languages, and the next thing I know, I was dragged into 20 languages, and here we are.
And so basically for you, it all started with the friend. It wasn't like, I'm going to pick up these languages because there is some strategic purpose behind it.
No, I just wanted my friends to be able to talk to my family without me being there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then how did you create, because right now is it 40 languages that you have on your list?
We have data sets and we build pipeline for 70 languages actively.
Okay.
But for the models we have in production and the languages we expose to the public, there are 30 languages.
And what is the strategy? So what is the sort of like the path for you guys to choose what language is next?
The reality is a bit grim, and I'll just be very honest with you. It's the biggest thing we look at is the ease of getting data. Do I want to see a world where every language that wants to have AI has AI? Yes, absolutely. But we also have to be practical about these things, right? A lot of languages do not even have written formats, right? I don't have a specific figure on this, but if I were to guess, again, there are more than 7,000 languages in the world. I would guess more than 80% of them have no formal standardized written formats, right? And so it's unreasonable and very naive to think you're going to build solutions for all of them. And so for us, we look at what's the lowest hanging fruit, because you also want to build momentum with these things. You want to start and drive interest, show utility, and then get more people interested and wanting to help push this forward, right? Like, even though we're working on 70 languages, we have a lot of people reach out to us who are not in the 70 languages we're looking at, but they see the work we're doing and they're like, hey, we truly believe in what you're doing. Can we actively contribute data and resources to help you also better support our languages, right? So slowly, I'm hoping we're going to expand that list, but practical wise right now, I do think in the foreseeable future, the most realistic, say, set of languages that we can reasonably work on for African languages to a production grade level, probably 100 in the foreseeable future.
In foreseeable future.
Yeah, yeah.
How long does it take to build a model for one language? I'm sure it's a work in progress, right? You just never finish.
Exactly.
But to get to a certain level, and what level that is, like what is the stage by stage process?
Right. It's very tough, and like you said, it's very dependent on the language, and it's a continuous process. For languages that, so even within the low resource spectrum, you can think of, and low resource spectrum being languages that do not have a considerable amount of data. And this is largely all African languages, right? But even within that spectrum, you can still think of some languages that have better support than others, right? If I think of Swahili, if I think of Afrikaans, if I think of Zulu, if I think of Yoruba, these languages have decent language data out there. Like there have been enough Wikipedia articles about them, in those languages. There have been enough books that have been written and digitized in those books. There have been enough teaching speech data that exists, both open source and closed source for these languages. And then you have sort of the middle tier of languages, like Kusal, you have Chi, you have some of those languages in the middle that sort of like borderline, not too much resources, but have a lot of resources. And you have the tail end, which is the majority, by the way, which have no language data, right? So the pipeline starts with us trying to capture as much data as we can. And that we do through a combination of different processes, and I'm happy to tell you more about that.
Yes, I would love to. What are those processes?
Sure. So the first and the lowest hanging fruit is to find data that's already open, right? There is this saying that you build on the shoulders of giants, and that's true also in NLP and the work we do, that a lot of people, even way before my time, have gone through the trouble of collecting some of this data initially. And so, and open and to be used for both research and commercial purposes, right? And so we tap into some of that existing data set for the languages that have them. That's the first easiest way, but that can get you so far, because a lot of the data sets of these kind of data sets tend to be very old or very specific to a specific domain. For example, like a Bible or religious data set. In as much as it's useful for prototyping your systems, it doesn't have too much utility beyond a church proceeding or something that requires that specific way of speaking, right? And so we augment that data with our own data collection pipelines. We build a custom tool called All Voices. And All Voices is designed to be able to collect data directly between different languages, completely bypassing English, which is something, one of our proudest works, that before All Voices, I wasn't aware of any system that lets you say, for example, I wanted to collect data between Swahili and Afrikaans or any two African languages. There's always, you have to go through a bridge language. Like you have to go through English and then you go from English to the other language, right? But we build an architecture that allows us to go from two low resource languages directly without having to go through any intermediary. We also have it such that it's gamified, it's open, it's free, people can use it. And so that's also an avenue that we work directly with communities to then collect data in this front.
And how do you work with the communities?
That's a great question. Working with communities is interesting because it very much also depends on the community. At least once or twice a week, we have somebody from some community email us and be like, hey, we want to collaborate. We have data or we want to collect data. There are communities like that who
and those
actively...
Are those voices that you guys collect?
Both.
Both.
But for me, the utility when it comes to building for low resource languages is more so on the voice side than the text. Like, I'll take voice any day, anytime, and I'll tell you why. For people like myself who are lucky enough to both know these local languages but also be able to express myself in English and other high resource languages, I don't see myself, being completely honest, solving like a physics problem in Chi or Hausa, because I'm not going to do that, right? if I have a question that I want answered on the internet or from an LLM, I am most likely going to ask it in a high resource language. But the person who's going to use the low resource language is the person who most likely cannot read or write in English to begin with, right? If you think of a rural farmer who cannot read in English, if they truly wanted information, they would want to speak that information to a system. If they could read and write, they would most likely do it in a high resource language. So typing as a medium of interacting with LLMs doesn't necessarily hold when we are considering these societies.
So the community will reach out to you guys, and are they reaching out on a certain topic that they care about, or you guys choose the topic?
So people generally reach out because they see everything that's going on in society, they see all the opportunities that exist, and they just want to see their languages on a digital platform. They want to be able to have a keyboard that represents their language. They want to be able to have their kids and their grandkids be able to learn their languages on a digital platform. That's usually where people come in.
I'm curious to see how the community benefits from these projects.
Right. For us, this is still relatively a work in progress. But I can tell you some examples about use cases that I think genuinely benefit the community in general. For example, we're working with a farmer group right now based in West Africa that works with about 30,000 farmers, okay? And a majority of these farmers will be speaking in their local dialect. So we're working with them to actively say, how can we use our Manta LLM and our systems to help them to be able to better communicate with these farmers, right? That's a genuine use case that I think benefits the community. We work with communities in mental health who use our technologies to reach out to these communities. We reach communities in menstrual health. We reach communities in misinformation. We are working with communities to demystify stereotypes about Africa. So there's a lot of benefits that I think benefit the community as a whole, but we haven't done anything necessarily where, say, we would go to a village and work with a grandma or something. That we haven't done anything of that sort, but I think that's sort of the next big hurdle for those really tail-end languages with very few speakers.
Do you have maybe a story that you can share with us about community or a language that was not digitalized, but then maybe with your project or any project that you know about, the language got digitalized and that community changed the way how they do things?
Right. So with the African Languages Lab, we are yet to work with a community from scratch, which doesn't have any resources. But I've heard stories of a lot of these. There is a particular story that I believe comes out of Senegal, where this guy who I believe I think he's a school teacher, and he was bothered by the fact that his language isn't supported, that he started creating his own almost like encoding structure for his language. And I think that project has done so well that they've ended up working with Unicode and some other large organizations to be able to create whole writing systems for that language. And that system that was created from that language is then being adopted by the neighboring languages that are similar to what this group led. And I think that's a really, really good example of communities who truly want their languages to be digitized. So they take the initiative and then they get support from the broader community to then push it forward.
I want to ask your opinion because of course there are two different opinions here. So we have group of researchers and linguists that support digitalization of languages.
Right.
And then we have critics who are saying that by digitalizing one group of languages, they have another group of languages who are actively dying.
Yeah.
So if we are going to take a look at African languages, it's about 2000, you said more than 2000. We also know that at this point, you said that you got how many languages? Can you correct me? I don't want to
Yeah,
use the wrong
can I
information. About 70 languages
yeah, that
you
we
guys
work on
would
70.
70
Yeah.
languages. So I'm looking at the percentage from more than 2000. So
Yeah, yeah.
like I don't know what the
It's
percentage is,
nothing,
like
right?
80%, 88% probably,
Yeah.
that are not getting any support from you guys. But maybe there are some other researchers that are working on it.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your take on it? What position you guys are taking?
It is a tough one. Let's start with this story. So, a couple of years back, I'm from Ghana, so I can speak to this a bit more closely. The government of Ghana made it official for certain languages to be taught in school. I think before high school, like you can learn in your mother tongue, and there were, I believe, 6 or so languages that were selected to be like these are the ones that our current education system can support.
Mm-hmm.
And for those languages, great, right? They have better support now. There's more teachers who are trained to teach these languages. There's better books and resources that are created for them. But that also has an unintended consequence of, well, if there are like more than 100 or 200 languages spoken in this country, and these 10 are being prioritized, well, what about the others? So I think it depends on. I don't think there's a right or wrong solution in this case. Yes, prioritizing some languages effectively means less attention is given to other languages. But then you can also argue, yeah, I mean, if everything was kept in English, right, which it is, we were colonized by the British, so we've actively used English in all our formal settings, then none of these languages are going to get any attention to begin with. Mm-hmm. And so it's unfortunate, like tough luck, but it is what it is. But on the whole, I do think different communities should have the choice to decide whether or not they want their languages to be digitized or not. And I'll give you examples that during colonization and during times in human history where different groups tried to oppress other groups, usually one of the first things they went for was the language,
yes.
Right? I remember, and even outside Africa, I remember a good friend.
Still happening, so.
It's still happening, exactly. A good friend of mine, beyond Africa, who is Native American, was telling me this story also, that, yeah, the first thing they go for is their language. There's a statement that I don't remember exactly how it is, so don't quote me on this, but it's more so, I think, take a man's language and you take the man's soul, something around that, but you kind of get the implication of it, where the first thing is, let's try to remove that language. And so if you are a community or you know of communities that have been through this, I don't necessarily fault you if you're like, I want to stay far away from this as I can, right? Because what if this same systems are then used to are being weaponized again to infringe my community? So I think that I totally respect people and communities who make that choice. But for me, what I haven't necessarily come to terms with is who makes that decision, right? Say, for example, you're in a community and there are only, let's simplify this. If you're in a community and there are 5 speakers and you decide to make the language digital, but somebody doesn't, I think as a society, I'm not sure if we've come up with a framework to be able to better decide who makes that call, right? But yeah,
it's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, the broader question is, do you think technology dividing us more, or does it bring us together? Or will it divide us more or bring us together? What's your take?
Generally, I'm an optimist, and I like to believe in people, and I also believe in the potential of technologies. You know, very similar to something like fire. There is potential for it to be used for both good and nefarious cases, depending on who is wielding that power. We live in a world where it's going to be increasingly digital. Unless you find an island and go bar yourself from everything, I think the world is going to continue being digital. I do think technology as a whole has the potential to unify us as people. Just think about the example of, say, for example, right now we have an interpretation tool for some of these languages that my friend couldn't speak and my family couldn't speak. And so if my friend were to come back now, he will be able to hear my childhood stories directly without me having to be a filter. And I can see them forming even stronger bonds than before. But I could also see how this could be weaponized, right? And be used against people. And if we even think about technology beyond just language, and we think about it in the bigger context of social media and just whole consumption of information and deep fakes and whatnot, then it starts to become more problematic, right? On the language level, I am very optimistic that we should make it that way. But on a grander societal level, I think with how things are going in the current world we live in, I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure technology is uniting us. I think there's a lot of, it's very easy to be sucked into a dark hole on social media, on all these platforms, and just see the evil in people and see only the bad, right? Because that's what these algorithms feed on. They want to see the reaction. They want to see you like, oh, I hate this person. But people forget about all the wonderful things that are also happening in the world. Some of my favorite pages on social media are pages that show you the good that's happening in the world, right? It's very, very easy to think of all the wars, think of all the crises, all the hunger, and those are valid. I think we should not forget about them. But let's also remember there are people doing good work out there. There are people actively working to deliver aid to other people. There are people actively working to cure some diseases. There are people actively working to get us to different planets. You know, I think there are people actively trying to solve these problems, and
those problems cannot be solved without language.
Exactly.
So yeah,
exactly.
that is a good one.
Exactly.
And you worked on some interesting projects. The chatbot. Let me see. The project that you worked on, the taboo topics chatbot. What did you learn from it?
That was a fun project. So that project basically started because we were working with this organization who I'm not gonna name drop because I don't have their permission. They were working with girls in rural areas, and this is again before COVID. Like this project started before COVID, and so before COVID, they would actively go to the villages. They would find little corners under a tree or in a church or in a mosque, and then talk to mostly girls about menstrual and sexual health.
It was also related some mental health, which is very needed, right?
Yes, exactly. But then after COVID hit, just imagine the whole world is going crazy. There is no way for them to actively go and talk to these girls and give them this information that they actively need. Just because there's a pandemic doesn't mean people have stopped, menstruating, for example.
Right.
And so all these questions still exist. And so we were working with these communities to say, how can we have these girls have access to this same amount of information in their local languages, right, through AI. And so we learned quite a lot from that. Initially, for the first versions that we prototyped, this example I use all the time, that if a girl were to ask the initial LLM then, how or where do I go get a menstrual product or whatnot, it will say, well, you can go to your nearest Walmart, right? But this is a girl in, I don't know, rural Ghana or rural Ethiopia. They don't have a Walmart. They don't know what the heck that is. And so we had to do a lot of work to localize and contextualize a lot of the material and the conversations that these models were having with these girls, right? To make it so that they can still have these conversations.
Can I stop you for a second?
Please.
Because some of our listeners do not know what localization is. Could you specify what is localization process and how did you guys do that?
Right. So I guess on a broader level, localization really involves, there are two ways to think about it. The simplest way to think about it is you take some content that, say, for example, was available in English and then just translate it into somebody's language. That's the very brutal way to explain it. And I think
again, that is translation. That's
exactly.
not localization.
Exactly. That's
right?
the most brutal way to explain it. But thinking about it in a localization sense is trying to make the information be as relevant to the people who are actually going to consume it, right? Very good example with the Walmart. If, sure, Walmart works in a US context. It's localized for a US context. But if I'm in rural Ethiopia, I don't know what Walmart is. And so that information needs to be localized. Maybe for me, it's not even a store. It's maybe go talk to your auntie about it. Or it's maybe go to this a kiosk or something and get that same product. You make it super localized to that community.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you for thank you for explaining it, because
Of course.
again, you and I, we are in the industry,
Right.
and not everybody knows the difference. So
Right.
how what else? How did that project go? What else did you guys learn from it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of learning on that front. Then there is also the aspect of just making sure that the information that you've been provided to this audience, very vulnerable communities, at least to the best of our abilities, not going to cause them more harm or put them in more trouble. Remember, these
Because
are
again,
taboos.
and there is like accuracy and mental health were
Yeah,
involved too.
exactly.
And for mental health, we have
Exactly. Yeah. So
those are very vulnerable groups, we should say, right?
Exactly.
And again, and when mental health is involved, you
yes, exactly.
already in such a high tension environment as pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. And so we actively try to work with the organizations that were already working with these girls to very work closely with them. So I remember we would, in our training data sets and whatnot, we would actively work with them through like each line of the data. Like, is this looking right to you? Is this localized? Is this actually talking about lived experiences of these girls? Is this what you would communicate to the girl if you were talking to them, right? For example, then there were topics that we weren't even thinking about when we were building this, right? A good example of this was girls being teased for having their period in school and feeling shameful about them. It's not something we considered when we were initially building this, but again, working with these community partners, it's like, guys, this is a problem we see all the time. These girls are getting shamed. So they actively, and this is what I love about efforts like this, where you can tell people doing it as a labor of love. It's not just, I want to get paid, so let me just do it. But you're actively, yeah, this is an aspect we're not considering. This is an aspect that we're not considering. Let's talk about it this way. Let's involve this. That for me was very, very motivating and really spoke to the kind of effort that people are trying to do to make the world hopefully slightly better than it is.
And we talked about this during the dinner at the Lockworld.
Lockworld.
What do you think? Well, we know that there is a lot of economy that is moving towards Africa right now. So what's your take on that? Opening those languages. What because again, we just mentioned the fact that out of more than 2,000 languages, and those maybe 70 languages sounds like not a big deal, but at the same time, it's a gate opener to a lot of opportunities for the local communities, probably.
Right.
When you look at this number, what gives you hope and what frustrates you?
I think what gives me hope when I look at this number and other related numbers, it's the fact that they are climbing. And that's true on many fronts when we think about Africa as a whole, right? That if you think of some of the fastest growing economies, like if you take, say, the top 10 fastest growing economies, almost always for the past 10 years, like African countries have been at least 5 of them. So there's a lot of growth happening. You think of things around population and just having youthful populations and people who can actually work and pay taxes and use internet and buy the services. Overall, globally, we see a trend that most countries are just declining population-wise, and then you look at Africa, it's like, whoop, right? Right now, there are about 1.5 billion people across all of Africa, and in the next 30 years or so, you're expecting that number to balloon to almost like 2.5 billion, right? If you think of youth, people who are young between, say, 15 to 35 or whatever range you use to define youth, Africa is right now around like a third of all of the global youth. And that's fascinating to think about, because again, by 2050 or 2030 to 2050, that population is going to represent about 40% of the world's like youthful population, right? So people see all of this, they see all the potential, they see the market. I mean, the economy is crazy moving, and so people see that. And the other part of this, which for me is, well, frustrating and exciting, is Africa has a lot of problems, right? Let's be honest about that. But then where there are problems, there are opportunities. I think that's the mindset that I want people to think
see that
about.
the same way.
Exactly.
And when you see problems and opportunities, how do you see it? Because you travel there. You just told me that you were traveling and you're going back.
Yeah.
So what problems and opportunities you see? And in my opinion, any problem and opportunity can be resolved through communication.
Right. I
That's
totally
what the
agree.
communication is for.
That's 101. If I can't talk to you about something, if I cannot express what I want to tell you, then how can we work together? How can I sell you stuff? How can I convince you that what I'm doing is even useful, right? So I do agree that language is the initial bridge. Like there's so many big companies, you know of them, but again, I'm not going to name drop them because of permission issues, we're trying to work with to understand the African market, to see the potential. Well, they do see the potential. I think right now a lot of people are sort of coming around. Think of all the big companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Walmart, Uber. All the major companies are trying to get a foothold in Africa right now because they see the opportunity, they see the numbers. It's undeniable. But a lot of people do not really understand the market. We've had some pretty big companies made some quite diabolical failures in Africa because they truly didn't really understand the market.
What is important for any company that wants to do business to understand Africa? I've been seeing the same numbers because I'm Russian, and before all those companies try to go and do business with Russia, the truth of the matter is Russia is huge.
Right.
Huge.
Right.
But if you look at the population, the population is much smaller.
Yeah.
And it's an old, aging population.
Right.
So they're not going to be buying
right.
as hard as the population in Africa is buying.
Yeah.
But what is important to understand about the culture?
Yeah.
And communication again.
Right. You said something right there. What is important to understand about the culture? That last phrase is the most important one, understanding the culture and the people and their way of lives. I think a lot of companies just take what they see work in other places and then they try to just transplant it and they assume that's going to work. Like majority of the time, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to work. And it's actually, some of them are just, so Uber, for example, they try to make it work in Africa, but then you have cases where, a lot of cases, even right now, that my Uber driver will be like, where are you? I'm like, just look on the app. But then they just want to circumvent Uber and still come pick me up and just get paid. And so you really need to understand how people think, how people behave, and how they react to a lot of these technologies, and build solutions that are tailored towards them. There's a company that I really, really like because it's done such a great job across all of Africa. I never know how to say their name, Nestle, I think that's what they're called. So when I was growing up, there was this drink that I liked. It was called Milo. And I always thought Milo was a Ghanaian drink. Like, you couldn't convince me otherwise. And then I was having a conversation with my friend who is from Nigeria. And she tells me she thought Milo was a Nigerian drink. Like, I couldn't convince her otherwise. And then we both look into it. And then turns out I think they have one of their biggest headquarters all the way in South Africa. And I asked my friend in South Africa, they're like, yeah, we also thought Milo was a South African drink. Company. But then it turns out that it's, I believe, a Swiss company. But they've done such a wonderful job localizing to the African market that it's almost indistinguishable. The flavors that they have, the activities, like you go to all the high schools, they're sponsoring all the games, they're speaking the languages, you don't see any foreigners or anything. It's just super localized, the colors. I never thought that Milo and their whole sort of Nestle chain wasn't a Ghanaian product. That's how good of a job they did. And they're raking in, I don't know how much they're making, but they're raking in like good money from all this investment.
So basically, again, for our listeners to understand, that's what it means when we say go global, stay local.
Exactly.
So you just localize it for the local market, so the
Exactly.
local people
It's
do not even
indistinguishable. Like
they do not even
they
understand
don't
that.
even know it's an outside company. It's completely indistinguishable.
And again, for anybody who's listening right now, that's what it means. If you want to do business in Africa, understand more than 2,000 languages
Right. Exactly. But
and
mhm,
culture.
right. I think people get scared by that number, and I could see why. But I think the most important thing is you don't have to have your product be available in all 2,000 languages. Like nobody's asking that. If you pick the top 10, 20 African languages, you can probably cover 50% of the whole continent's population. Because remember, in Africa, people don't speak one language. I do not know any African who speaks just one language. Like anybody who's actually from Africa, I don't know one person who knows just one language. It's almost unheard of. And so a lot of
That's
people,
what you were saying. Your family was 10.
yeah,
7.
exactly. So like people would speak the highest of the low resource languages, if you can think about it that way, like Swahili or Hausa or Yoruba, whatever sort of the dominant community languages. Most people would know that language, right?
And this is something. Okay, can you specify, because the way that I look at it, Swahili, Hausa, it would be kind of like equivalent to European French,
Mm-hmm.
English,
Right.
German.
Exactly. Right. Because I think people underestimate how big and diverse the whole continent of Africa is, right? Because the geography of Africa is such that you can fit all of the US, you can fit China, you can fit Japan, you can fit most of Europe, like all in Africa at the same time. So it's huge.
So for me, if
Mhm.
I am traveling to Africa, which I'm planning to do
Yeah.
soon, if I want to, I wouldn't say I wouldn't say melt in, but
Mhm.
to be successful
Yeah.
and collaborate with the locals.
Yeah.
Give me 3 highlights. What I should do.
People love your food, so you should
Try.
try to know your food. Music and dancing, people love that. We should do some African moves later, but people love to dance, and so if you can
So eat. I
dance.
definitely can do that. What else? What is the third one?
Third one, I'll say try to learn a few words from the language. People love that. Like when they see people actually trying to say something in their language, even if it's not perfect. You know, there is this saying that I believe it's by Nelson Mandela actually, that if you speak to a man in a language he understands, it goes to his head. But if you speak to that same man in his language, it goes to his heart. And I think that's very true. And I've seen that time and time again, that people who actually make an effort to even say hello in these low resource languages, people just go like crazy and just very excited, right? And they build a much stronger connection with them. Yeah.
And how do you say hello in Guyanese?
So let's do chi. So we don't have like a word for hello necessarily. You can say ago, but that's very old people speaking.
And before they go there, how many languages are spoken in Ghana?
Maybe like 250.
250.
Yeah, somewhere around that range. I don't have the
But what are
exact
the
number.
main languages?
The main ones would be Twi. Yes. So we have Twi, and then Hausa is pretty big in
Hausa,
Ghana. We have like Ga, it's a big one, and then you go to the northern regions. We have like Dogomba, Busanga, Kusasi. So it's quite a melting pot also. Yeah.
And what is your main for your family?
So for me, it's also a very similar melting pot because in my house we speak, like my dad's predominant language is called Busanga, okay, and my mom's like primary language is called Kusasi. And then in my community, just to be able to get around, right, you need to know these 3 other languages, like Chi, for example. You need to know Hausa, you need to know some Dogomba to be able to get around. And then you obviously need to learn English if you have formal education. Ghana is surrounded by all French-speaking countries, and so up till high school, you're required to learn French. I think you're required to, at least I was required to learn French up to that time. And in my community also, in my household, you need to also learn Arabic, right? So you put all these things together and maybe even beyond 7, right? So that's how people speak so many languages. My mom speaks even more languages than I do. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so let's say, how do you say hello in Twi and Hausa?
So in Chi, do you say, it's like, how are you? So you say Etisain.
Etisain?
Yeah, exactly. That's right on, actually. Yeah, that's right on. And then in Hausa, it depends. It's a gendered language, so it depends if you're speaking to a guy or a girl. If it's a guy, you say yakaki.
Ayakaki?
Yakaki.
Yakaki?
Exactly, so yakaki. And then if it's a girl, then instead of the yak, you say ki, so yakiki.
Yakiki?
Yeah, exactly. So that's how you'd say how are you. Yeah,
Languages is a great
I know.
way to connect. Of course.
How many do you know?
Oh.
My turn to ask the questions.
Well, I speak Russian, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But when I connect with my Russian friends, they always look at me like, oh my gosh, you sound like somebody who learned Russian.
Right, right.
I haven't been there for a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yes, I used to speak German.
Mm-hmm.
But now when I go to Germany and I push the sentence out of myself somewhere in a restaurant or a pub, they look at me and they just respond English to me.
English is like, okay, just speak English to her. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. You need to learn at least one African language. Just add it to your list.
I heard Swahili is not that difficult. Everybody who I talk to me, they're like, you have to learn Swahili. It's easy.
Yeah,
I don't know. It sounds like.
I mean, it's one of the biggest ones out there. It's probably the most spoken outside Arabic, African language. Yeah, maybe Hausa too, but sort of those are the big ones. And so if you know Swahili, you can probably talk to like a fifth of Africans, right? Because all of East Africa typically knows some Swahili or variation of Swahili.
So one of my guests on my podcast, Amari, he's based in Washington, D.C. He's one of our strategic partners. He is American who was born and grew up in New York. He learned Swahili.
Yeah.
He just learned Swahili. He told me that it was easy. I said, Amari, yeah, I'm proud.
Give it a shot. Give it a shot.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to ask you a question. So when I was researching and looking at your data, you said that it's already outdated. 2 billion tokens, word tokens, and 12,000 hours.
Yeah.
What is the latest?
I don't have I cannot share the exact figures right now. So the numbers you're referring to was us taking some of our data and then trying to create resources and demonstrate the utility of our data set, and also be able to show that even with a small quality data set, you can do better than Google Translate by training like a even generic model, right? And I was very excited with that work, right? We were able to show that our data set can help these base models significantly do better just by quality data. So data is, for us, the one of the main conclusions from that work is data is more, let me take a step back. The data is of high value to creating better resources for languages than the model itself. Yeah. So that was one of the highlights of that work. We've done for almost a decade now. We've been actively collecting data across all these 70 languages. And right now we don't really know what other people have sort of in their back pockets, but we are confident that we have the largest collection of multimodal data for African languages. Again, 70 languages. We have thousands and thousands of hours of speech and
What's the next project with the next language that you're looking forward to?
The next project is actually, and we haven't made this public yet. Maybe by the time this video comes out, it will be public. But we're going to release our own LLM. So right now we've been testing a lot of our models and architectures internally. We've actively exposed our translation, transcription, and then text-to-speech systems for people to use in production. Getting really, really good feedback and traction. But right now we are going to release an actual LLM that's adapted and trained specifically to handle African languages, their context, be localized, and be able to handle all those specific nuances. So it's something I'm very, very excited about. It's going to be coming out really, really soon.
Exciting. Are you
Yeah.
going to be collaborating with some of the big tech companies?
I plead the fifth on this one. Yeah, I cannot really disclose a lot of that information, but it it should be very exciting. I mean, if you think about it this way, if you think about like models coming out of the, let's just say, the northern hemisphere of the Americas, right? Or the Americas in general, you can think of Claude, you can think of ChatGPT, and then you think about like models coming out of China, you think of models coming out of Southeast Asia. But so far, there haven't been any models that have come out specifically to handle African languages. There are some, but they are not intended to be used in production environments, right? Again, we don't really know what everybody, there are other people doing this work, so we can't really know what they have in their back pockets, but we are going to release the first public and like high performing production grade LLM tailored for African use cases that encompasses different modalities, images, speech, and text. And we, for me, right, it's not just about releasing a model, trying to score some points on a benchmark. It doesn't mean shit at the end of the day, okay? It's all about,
It does.
well, to the big labs, but I think it's all about, for me, it's about utility and practicality. I want to build something that people are going to use and people are going to care about, right? The examples I'm giving you of working with these farmers, working with people on misinformation, working with people on mental health, you want systems that are engineered for those use cases. You can just use any model and expect it to work well. Very similar to the example we talked about with Walmart, right? The models answering to get your period supplies from Walmart. You don't want that. So we're very excited to release that and make it be super useful and make it super relevant to people on the continent also.
And a lot of my listeners, they are not tech people. And at the same time, they want to make sure that they are being understood.
Yeah.
And they communicate as such. And some of them maybe want to go and do business with Africa, as we just discussed.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend, what they should start doing on Monday?
Yeah.
If they want to go that direction?
First thing Monday morning, after your morning coffee, just look for, see, built in Africa.
Because again, like, let me just paddle back a little bit.
Yeah.
Because again, I love what you're saying. I love your way of doing things, that belonging and inclusion, not just in Africa. I think it's a global thing.
Right.
We do not wait for this. We build it.
Yeah.
And again, this is a pool of my listeners.
Yeah.
They want to learn from you and they want to do it right. And that's why I'm asking you what they should start doing on Monday.
Yeah.
If they want to build something that you build.
I honestly think the first thing is a mindset. I've always believed that I am never too small to make a difference. Okay. That for me, it's a guiding principle. And I saw this joke that if you think you're too small to make a difference, just imagine being in a room with a single mosquito, okay? There's no way you're going to have your peace of mind. It's making a difference on you. It's biting you. It's causing noise in your ears and whatnot. And so for me, I think that mindset is very important, that there are a lot of problems in this world that a lot of people can tackle. Money is important, and we all need to keep the lights on and buy nice clothes and everything. But I think having a mindset of thinking, what is the hardest problem in my area, something that I care about, that I can start tackling right now, Start small, but move very, very quickly and see how it goes. And for folks, say, trying to get into the continent or do business, very similarly, you can do it. You just need to find the right partners. That, for me, is the best starting point. Find people you can trust, people you can work with, people, like, we recommend different companies. Like, if you want to work in supply chain logistics or something and it's not something we do, I can very much tell you, hey, this is a trusted party. try to work with them directly. So just having those trusted networks of people you can really work with for Africa, that's usually the way to go. Yeah,
Yeah, that's partnership is important.
it really is. Trusted partners.
Trusted partners is important.
Mhm.
True. And that was great conversation with Sheriff Issaka, who
Mm-hmm.
grew up without computer, without digital world, and now he is leading the whole AI initiative for African languages and
Well, part of
upcoming
the people
LLM.
doing it.
What is that?
Part of the people doing all the work. There are a lot of incredible people out there doing a lot of incredible work for African languages, and some before me, some with me, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more after me.
I'm
hopefully.
excited about the initiative that you just said that is just around the corner to be released.
Yeah.
I want to see
I can show you
that
after
change that
All
is
right,
going to
sounds
be
good.
bringing. Yes, thank you
Mhm.
for that.
Of course.
So one traditional question that I ask in the end, what conversation you wish people were having a lot more today?
That's a tough one. I think we should be talking a lot more about people. It's very easy to think about AI as something that's going to take away all of our problems, like as a solution that you sit in the Bay Area and then you imagine, oh, we have self-driving cars here, all of our problems are solved, right? But then at the end of the day, who is being impacted by these? And I've always held the opinion that the people who are least represented in all these technologies are the ones who are most affected by them, right? And this is on so many different levels. I want you to think about who is building the future that we're all going to be living in, because we keep saying technologies for the global good, for yada yada, but who is actually building them? And I'll give you a good framework to think about it. If you look at all the launches of all the top models that are coming out, just consciously look at the people who are announcing them. Look at the diversity or the lack thereof of the people in the room who are actually driving these initiatives, okay? Ask yourself how many women are in this room, how many people of color are in this room, right? How many people are in this room whose framework is not, say, San Francisco centric? Just these things, and thinking about who these systems are affecting. I'm of the opinion that, or at least I hope, that nobody's sitting anywhere but like, how can I build technologies that's going to screw people over? But how do we put people in the center of everything? Like, I think we're very much focused on the technology and less on the people, and we forget that at the end of the day, it's people that we should be building for, right? It's people whose life we want to make better. It's people who are going to use the systems, that these systems don't live in a vacuum. It's going to affect people. If you're building systems that cannot recognize people's faces, or it's docking people points or giving them bad credit, or and it's letting people not getting access to healthcare, that's life and death situation, right? I think it's one thing to think very abstractly, oh, my chatbot is not responding properly. It's so insidious that way, but then people's lives are actually being affected by these systems that we're building. We can keep going that rabbit hole.
It's incredibly important to remember this, because sometimes it's scary that we end up building technology for the sake of technology, and then we start competing with each other.
Yeah.
Who is going to get it better?
Yeah.
In the end of the day, we forget what's the whole purpose of it, because we're building it for us.
Exactly.
To make the life better.
Exactly.
Right? And then this in the whole, I like this terminology that we have right now, is with the human in the loop, but then we forget about the human.
Yeah, exactly. There is now the term looping is actually being adopted to make it so that AI systems provide feedback to AI systems. So the human is actually being completely removed, quite literally, from the meaning of human in the loop right now. The term looping, I've seen it being pushed currently actively to be, how can you make the agents not come back to me to ask me questions, not come back to me to get feedback or to have clarification, but then just make it loop itself into getting the right answer.
Yes, unless we set up those agents, but again, not everybody is good at it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. thank you again for bringing it back to our attention.
Of course.
Well, it was a great conversation. Thank you so much
Same.
for coming all the way to the studio from your busy day.
Of
I know
course.
you're busy.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversations, and I really hope this is useful to one person.
I'm sure it's going to be more than one.
Okay.
And thank you for giving this information, and I hope you're enjoying the game today.
Yes, we are playing today. I don't have too much faith we're gonna win, but hey,
Participation is more
participation is more important. We showed up, okay? Unlike the Nigerians, we showed up.
Always. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much, and thank you for joining Connected Conversations in the world that has been more connecting than ever and still so lonely at the same time. Thank you for tuning in into Connected Conversation. We truly value your feedback and would love to hear from you. Please let us know what story you would like to hear next. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Let's keep the conversation going, and let's continue to inspire each other. Let's stay in touch. Thank you.